At the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion on April 15th, 1971, not long after my 8th birthday, the Academy Awards for the films of 1970 were held. The 5 films up for Best Picture were Patton, MASH, 5 Easy Pieces, Airport, and Love Story. By the night of the Oscars, I had seen all 5, obviously at the theater. And the film I was rooting for, MASH, I saw 3 times. I saw practically every big movie that year. To illustrate how these movies were molding my taste, in 1968, my favorite movie was The Love Bug. In 1969, my favorite movie was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But by 1970, my favorite movie was MASH, an anarchist-themed military sex comedy. Nothing made me laugh harder than Hot Lips, Sally Kellerman, being exposed in the shower. Or Radar, Gary Berghoff, placing the microphone under the bed as Hot Lips and Frank Burns fucked. Then Trapper John, Elia Gould, broadcasting it throughout the camp. However, the whole middle section with Payless, the camp dentist going through homosexual panic never meant anything to me. Of course not. It's the lousiest part of the film. Again, while I really enjoyed MASH, part of the delight I had watching it was sitting in a cinema full of adults laughing hysterically, all getting off on their own naughtiness. Not to mention the fun I had going back to school and describing those scenes to the other kids in my class, who could never have dreamed of seeing a movie like MASH, or The French Connection, or The Godfather, or The Wild Bunch, or Deliverance. There was usually one other kid allowed to see some of the wild shit I saw. Because I was allowed to see things the other kids weren't, I appeared sophisticated to my classmates. And because I was watching the most challenging movies of the greatest movie-making era in the history of Hollywood, they were right. I was. I asked my mom about it. She said, "Quentin, I worry more about you watching the news. A movie's not going to hurt you."
Martin Scorsese's masterpiece, Taxi Driver.
If I were going to be like trapped on a desert island and I could go to video archives before I was going to get trapped on a desert island, Taxi Driver would be one of the films I brought with me. Robert De Niro, Jodie Foster, Martin Scorsese a little bit, Sybil Shepherd. Harvey Keitel is one of the finest performances in this movie, as we all know, sport.
Not only is this unarguably one of the greatest movies ever made, definitely, absolutely, positively, unarguably one of the greatest movies of the 70s, if not the greatest. And it's also one of my top 5 favorite movies. Whew. What to say about Taxi Driver hasn't already been said. What to say about Taxi Driver that's profound that you can't read in Pauline Kael? Well, I'll do my best. One of the things about Taxi Driver that is just so magnificent, as I actually do feel that it may be the greatest first-person character study ever committed to film. I mean, I really actually can't even think of a second or a third or a fourth that can even come into contention with it.
It's like a great novel in the way it tells its story, and it presents this guy, sickness and all right, and it presents him from his point of view, and it manages to do it in a very interesting way. It presents the movie from his point of view. You see the movie through his eyes. You actually, are repelled by these black pimps in the diner, the way he is. Even if you wouldn't be or not, you might be repelled. I'd be repelled anytime by pimps, all right? But almost the fact that they're black repels you because you're seeing it through his warped eyes. But like you never feel that like the filmmakers are like Travis Bickle, but you never feel that they've condemned him either. There's a purity enough in him to present him as he is. And it's one of the things that I remember when I was in my 20s, living in Hollywood, with just the whole like debris around there, all the pimps and the wackos and the whores and all that, walking down the street. Me and my friends, we'd like walk down the street and go, boy, you can really appreciate how Travis Bickle feels, when you walk down Hollywood Boulevard at night, day in and day out.
One of the things about Taxi Driver that is just, to me, so amazing is not only is it this wonderful character study of this, to put it lightly, troubled individual, what's so fascinating about the character study is it truly puts you in the point of view of this man. If you've ever been lonely and lived in a ghetto area and you've it's easy to feel Travis Bickle's kind of feelings of all alone me versus my environment, and the movie actually encourages that kind of empathy with a very questionable character.
What's special about that in an actor is, in particular, a lot of stars, for instance, don't want to go that far with a character. Don't want to completely alienate the audience. They want to remain likable. And this never seems to work into De Niro's thought process of how can I be more likable.
You see through his eyes so strongly. I mean, like, from one of the criticisms that was labeled against the movie when it first came out, which was wrong but very understandable for a lot of viewers to mistake, is the fact that the film was racist. Actually, the film is not racist at all, but it is a movie about a racist. Not only is it a movie about a racist, it's a first-person study of a movie about a racist. So actually, you do see the world through Travis Bickle's eyes, and through those eyes, he makes, the black pimps and the black characters on the street, they are repellent. And he flinches away from them at all times. And since you are looking through his eyes, you do as well. One of the things that actually could be crippling for the movie, and thematically, you could even say it's the film's big flaw, which actually by the end of the movie doesn't turn out to be. But thematically, you could say the film's compromise is that for all of Travis Bickle's racism, when it kind of comes down to taking out a gun and shooting people, he doesn't shoot any black people. That the flesh merchants happen to be all white, and the pimp actually is a white pimp, which, frankly, is highly unlikely in that world.
The unicorn, the screenwriter unicorn of the 70s and the early 80s is the white pimp. Harvey Keitel in Sport is definitely the best depiction of it. Even though I don't quite buy it, Harvey Keitel's so great in the movie. It's like the Taxi Driver without Harvey Keitel. What the fuck would that even be? They changed the character of the pimp that Paul Schrader wrote from black to white, basically because the producers are scared of it. They're uncomfortable with the imagery. And Columbia is uncomfortable with the imagery. Now, oddly enough, Columbia Pictures had no problem with all the murdering, scheming, and plotting and killing Caribbean brothers in the deed.
That's right.
But Taxi Driver apparently was a bridge too far. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they scared. I think they scared Scorsese. They said, "Hey, look, the race riots of a few years ago have cast a long shadow, and it would take only one big incident of violence during the opening couple of weeks to happen in the theater, and the film might just be pulled from general release for public safety." But the thing about it, though, is so they changed it to white, which at the end of the day, I'm sure Scorsese was coming from a place where it's like, well, if there even is a chance of the film being pulled and not being theatrically released, I don't want to take that chance. But also, he was looking for a good character for Harvey Keitel to play anyway. And he had even offered Harvey the Albert Brooks role, but Harvey turned it down. So this opened up a good role for Harvey. So okay, all the better. But then Harvey pressed the fraudulent aspect by saying, okay, well, let me meet a white New York pimp, so I can meet him and I can study him for the character. Well, then it became Schrader's job to go out in New York and search for this screenwriting 70s movie unicorn that does not exist in real life, called the New York White Street Pimp. And guess what? He didn't find them since they didn't exist.
Not that there weren't such thing as white pimps, but it is highly unlikely that Iris's pimp would be white. And it is highly unlikely that when Bickle does come to bear arms, he would bear them against white people as opposed to black people who have the same job. Having said that, what could be a crippling, what's the word I'm looking for? Contrivance. What could be a crippling contrivance ends up not being that. For one reason. Harvey Keitel. His performance is so magnificent as the pimp Sport, and his work with De Niro is of such an exquisite nature, as well as his work with Jodie Foster, which actually is about the only sequence in the movie that is not told from Travis Bickle's perspective. Their dance scene is of such quality, and his work as Sport is so magnetic and strangely personable that actually what could be a crippling contrivance isn't. It just goes away. Not only that, you can't imagine Taxi Driver without Harvey Keitel. What would that be? Some of the other qualities about Taxi Driver is with such a forward thrust of this first person character. One of the things that's so fascinating about it is all the other little bits that find itself in the movie, bits that are completely at odds with this tone of a madman's diary, which is more or less what we're dealing with here. For instance, some of the favorite bits in the film are the little scenes between Sybil Shepherd and Albert Brooks. And when those moments happen, I think in the 70s, the first thing you thought of was the front page, because it has that kind of snappy patter. But then later, it's impossible now to watch it with all of a sudden, without thinking broadcast news has all of a sudden, shown up in Times Square, and little scenes, quick witty scenes from broadcast news have somehow inserted themselves into Taxi Driver. And I think it's obvious that for me as a filmmaker, I'm a lover of turning on a dime, and that's definitely a situation where that happened. Now, there is an interesting history behind Taxi Driver that's definitely worth noting. It's one of those things that's fallen down into Hollywood legend. I have no idea if it's true. I have no idea how much of it's true, if any of it's true. But to me, it's the most interesting legend of during that decade of the movie brats. What happened was Scorsese had made Taxi Driver, and he'd finished it. And if you can imagine the work that is Taxi Driver, if you had made it and completed it, you would be understandably happy. Truthfully, I can't even imagine what it'd be like to make Taxi Driver. However, he made the film for Columbia, and the MPAA slapped it with an X. And so Scorsese was now going to have to be faced with making a masterpiece that he thinks is perfect and having to slash his canvas. And the people or person at Columbia, who I don't have a clue who it is or if this even happened at all, was unsympathetic. They didn't care. They would just get an R. Just get an R. We don't care how you do it, just do it. And the legend goes that Scorsese stayed up all night drinking, getting drunk with a loaded gun. And his purpose was, in the morning, he was going to shoot the executive at Columbia for making him cut his masterpiece.
And I'm going to kill him.
And it turned out to be a vigil all night as Scorsese sat there with a loaded gun in his lap, and some of his fellow filmmakers and friends came and talked to him and commiserated with him and tried to talk him out of it. And apparently this lasted all night long. I've heard stories that literally all of them grew up that night because they realized how serious Scorsese was at the prospect of what he was going to do. Well, apparently what ended up happening is by the end of the night, by truly contemplating shooting the man and knowing he was going to do that, when that became such a reality, he did reach inside of himself to try to find one other thing he could do other than commit murder. And the idea that came to him was just to desaturate the color in the final shootout by 2 degrees, turning what was candy apple blood red into a more burgundy blood. He did that in lieu of killing a man, and the film got its R. And that's a Taxi Driver uncut as you see today. Again, Mr. Scorsese, if none of this has happened, I apologize. I am simply relating legend. But I can honestly say, as an artist, if it's not true, I wish it were. This is Quentin Tarantino. You are watching Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. Enjoy.
You should see what a 44 Magnum is going to do to a woman's pussy. You should see.
I think Taxi Driver is one of the best movies ever made, and in the case of Taxi Driver, he was writing this vicious, cracked mirror reflection of a vigilante movie, like something like a Death Wish, all right? But again, a cracked mirror, bizarro world version of it, and where the movie doesn't take the character off the hook for the things he does. Taxi Driver without Harvey Keitel, I can't even fucking imagine that. I mean, I associate Harvey Keitel as much with Taxi Driver as I do with Travis Bickle. I mean, it's just unthinkable without him. So I do think Scorsese made the best version of the movie to be made. Nevertheless, part of the analysis wasn't talking about how good the movie is, even though I did say that. It was about being critical of the reasons why they made that choice. And and the reasons belong to the producers, Michael and Julia Phillips, and the reasons belong to Columbia Pictures. And I think it's horseshit, all right, the fact that they wanted to change, the fact that they were nervous that the pimp character and then the fuck hotel character gets shot at the end is black. And not only is it horseshit, their reasoning, they came up with a horseshit excuse. The excuse that they said, the reason that we're doing it, why we have to do it, is because, well, we show this in black theaters, black audience. There's going to be there could be riots, there could be violence in the theater, and if that were to happen, well, then the film will just get pulled, and then that's that. And then that kind of violence did happen a few years later when it came to The Warriors, when The Warriors opened, and the film ended up getting pulled. All right, but I think that's a completely bullshit argument. I don't think that was the case. It's almost like Travis Bickle's own thinking that they think the black audiences are so fragile that they couldn't stand the bad guys being black, and it's also really crazy because in '78 they have all the bad guys in The Deep are black, all right, but apparently those Caribbean brothers, and Columbia Pictures too, but those Caribbean brothers, they were okay, but sport was a bridge too far. I don't buy it. No, the reason is the white people making the movie got really uncomfortable with the imagery. So they came up with a bullshit excuse to cover their uncomfortability. And that's what I call a social compromise. And I'm against making social compromises in art. Yeah, maybe people can handle it. Well, too fucking bad, all right? You do it, and maybe these audiences won't understand it, can't handle it, but maybe other audiences down the line can, or maybe they can, and that's just where you are. Now, having said all that, and this is not me trying to be a nice guy to Martin Scorsese, I do blame him the least of it. I don't think he was the one worrying about shit like that, other than them getting him nervous. I think, they described a worst case scenario of him killing himself to make this movie and then it getting pulled from theaters. And frankly, that was a chance he was not willing to take. And I can understand that. I think they scared the shit out of him about it. But also, he really wanted a part for Harvey Keitel, and there really wasn't one. And so that offered up an opportunity for him to stick Harvey in the movie. And then we were all better for it. Okay, Apocalypse Now, which was, to me, Rocky was my personal favorite movie, but Apocalypse Now was the movie of the year, as far as I was concerned. And I took the bus to Hollywood to see it at the Cinerama Dome, and got the program that they gave out, and I still have the Life magazine with Brando on the cover.
Oh, wow.
I was into everything about Apocalypse Now. I've been reading about it for years. Couldn't wait to see it. That's one that I imagine being one of the guys on the boat. That would have been amazing.
There's this really great story about Francis Ford Coppola doing all the whole Robert Duvall sequences in Apocalypse Now. And, you know, they're using the helicopters to the Filipino airport, and he's paying for everything himself, and there's just all the incredible pressures of trying to do this. It's almost unimaginable. But him and Victoria Storaro come up with realized, much to his horrible chagrin, because he needs to get footage shot, much to his horrible chagrin, that if the helicopters aren't in the background, it just doesn't work. It's just dead. You can't have just the helicopters a little bit. After you've established the helicopters have to be flying in the air behind every single solitary shot. Okay, no, I didn't quite have as much of a problem as Francis Ford Coppola did, but I did tell the people, I go, look, if there's any shot in Spartan Ranch, I need to have a dog in the background. I mean, there can never be a shot that I don't see a dog doing something, because that was kind of what it was like. They had a lot of dogs there, you know, and that means the place is alive. Yeah. That means it's living. That means it's crawling. That means it's got fleas, you know, and that means it's scrounging. And it's just there's a movement. There's always movement going on. The place is alive, and there's always some living thing running from one pile of trash to another. Right. In the background, just keep it going.
Horror has a face. And you must make a friend of horror.
Well, there's a whole speech in Apocalypse Now when Brando's Kurt tells the story of going into the village and inoculating all of the children in the village, shooting their arms with flu shots or something like that, inoculating them. And then the soldiers came in and then hacked off all the kids' arms. And then there's like a little pile of arms.
There they were, in a pile of little arms.
And Kurt says, so we did all that, and then we came back in the village the next day and we saw the little pile of all the little arms in there where they hacked them off. And I cried like a baby. Then I started thinking, the genius of that.
And I thought, my God, the genius of that.
The genius of that. Because these are not monsters. They're not demons. These are men doing a job.
But these were not monsters. These were men, trained cadres.
And they had the force of will to take the job and take it to its logical conclusion of what they had to do.
The genius, the will to do that.
All right, I'm not condoning what Kurtz is saying. Kurtz is a fucking crazy person, right. All right, but I'm interested in his perspective. But of course, that would be Kurtz's perspective, where he's a god. He's a god, worshipped, by these natives. Yeah. He's completely lost his mind in the fog of war. But he's talking like Genghis Khan.
I ended up having a similar thing with All That Jazz. However, the thing that I remember about All That Jazz, by this point in time, I'm lying about my age, and I'm working at the Pussycat Theater. So I'm working at a porno theater. I'm 16 years old, saying I'm 18. So I'm working at the Pussycat Theater, and I just get off work, and I go and see, and it was Friday, and I just got paid. It's Friday night, and I just got paid. And I go see All That Jazz, and while I'm in the theater, I lose my paycheck. Yeah, it was a travesty. It was a disaster. No. And I still liked the movie so much. I was still happy, even with a tragedy, a disaster. That's a disaster. And I still love the movie. I still thought it was terrific.
I didn't really get All That Jazz when I saw it as a kid. At the time, I found it like she's deaf. I don't know. The whole thing was a little showtime.
I actually got that.
Well, you're better than I am.
No, it's. I think I got everything I needed to get, and I didn't. And what I didn't get, it didn't bother me.
Pulp Fiction.
Oh,